Right.
In this situation, what is the justification to do this without the governor's request? So that has opened up
it's different, like a different part of history
yes,
that
a load
we're
of
writing.
questions that we would love to pose to Jessica Levinson whenever she is able to join us. We are also awaiting at the top of the hour a law enforcement briefing with the LAPD. We expect to hear from Chief Jim McDonnell. We know LA County Sheriff Robert Luna is also involved in these discussions, and we saw some of his deputies as we see these demonstrators lighting a piece of cardboard on fire. They are intent on burning more cars tonight. We'll see if it happens here that one of them is a CHP cruiser that has been under attack for hours now. Folks throwing chunks of concrete, scooters, bikes, and more onto these vehicles below. It was a perfect shot landing on the hood of that vehicle. Again, here comes some fire retardant, a fire extinguisher to put that out. I don't know if it had much chance of lighting anything on fire, but
that's
again,
definitely coming from under the overpass then. So there are some police officers still there then. That shows they're still there.
Correct. And so we do also expect and hope to hear from the governor, who is in Los Angeles meeting with federal, local officials here, LAPD, LASD, and we believe that he will be speaking at this press briefing at the top of the hour. As we await that, as we await Professor Levinson, we continue to watch this chaos play out on the streets of Los Angeles. That includes the surface streets, which are the domain of Los Angeles, and the 101 freeway, which is the domain of the California Highway Patrol, which you can tell by these 3 CHP vehicles, which are now battered and dented after hours of projectiles being thrown at them.
And you can see an even larger crowd gathering now on, I believe that's still just the side of the overpass. The overpass still has a lot, but you can see more on the side, and they don't seem like they're going anywhere. It's getting late. We're getting close to sunset. Sunset's going to happen in the next 10 or 15 minutes. So unfortunately, it looks like this protest has made it into the evening hours when it starts getting dark. And then that raises more questions. What's going to happen when things get dark? Is that maybe where law enforcement draws the line and they say, okay, that's it. We need to, stop this right now and then go a different route? Or are they going to continue what they're doing and like what we've been seeing, let things fizzle out, play out, and then move in with the horses, move in with those to those barricaded areas? It's interesting to see like what their move is, especially as it's getting dark.
Right, the LAPD Central Division throwing out a traffic advisory saying due to demonstrators throwing objects onto the southbound lanes of the 101 freeway and damaging multiple police vehicles, the 101 southbound freeway will remain closed until further notice. This will take a lot of time, not only to get the demonstrators out of this area, but to clean up the mess they've now left behind.
Right.
You have 3 California Highway Patrol vehicles that will likely need to be towed. They could get out under their own power. We'll see how damaged they are. Then you have, hundreds of pounds of concrete that have now accumulated after being thrown from this overpass onto the roadway. That's not something you can just easily.
Right. How do you clean that up?
Right. Are you going to kick it off to the side of the road? Do you need a street sweeper? Do you need crews coming through and gathering them in trash cans or a dump truck to do that? And so questions remain about how that is going to be handled. We do have, as we await the press conference at the top of the hour, we do have Professor Jessica Levinson joining us tonight. And boy, Professor, we have some questions to talk about with you tonight. I don't know if we have 8 minutes to the top of the hour. Let's try and fit as much in as we possibly can. First, what's on your mind as you watch what's playing out in Los Angeles tonight in the battle now between California Governor Gavin Newsom and the President of the United States?
So I think what's on my mind is what's on everybody's mind, which is what happens next? What happens overnight? What happens tomorrow? Will we see a significant escalation? If there is a significant escalation, or frankly maybe any escalation, we could see the president say, I need to do more. We could see the president potentially, again, pull the cord and say, I need to invoke the Insurrection Act. As I'm sure you've been talking about, the Insurrection Act would give the president more authority to not just federalize the National Guard, but to say that the National Guard can actually act as domestic law enforcement, that the military on U.S. soil can search, can seize, can arrest. That's not something that we're accustomed to. So I'm looking to see, obviously, what's happening right now, but also how the situation evolves and how the president reacts.
And we have seen the president allude to the fact that and we're watching, sorry, Professor, there's a split screen here on the right side of your screen. We're seeing continued demonstrations, and a firebomb was just thrown down off of the 101 freeway overpass onto one of those CHP vehicles below, which is now burning. We'll see if they're able to put that out with the fire retardant from below. There's a fire extinguisher I believe they're deploying, but that looks like it's going to go. It looked like it was some kind of ball of fuel, whether it was alcohol or gas, lobbed off of this overpass, and that CHP vehicle is now on fire. So wow. We're having this conversation with these scenes playing out, Professor. We have heard the president twice within the last hour refer to the people, the demonstrators, and some of them violent and clearly breaking the law here, as insurrectionists. We have heard Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth threaten that the U.S. Marines will be deployed from Camp Pendleton onto the streets of Los Angeles if the violence continues. Is that allowed? Can the President of the United States legally, in a situation like this, deploy under the Insurrection Act, U.S. military to fight U.S. citizens on U.S. soil?
Okay, so in a situation like this is going to be the key. This is going to be where the fighting is. So let's talk really briefly about the federal statutes at issue here. We all know that the president can only act when there's something that gives him the power to act, or there's inherent constitutional power. In this case, what the president is pointing to is Title VII. This is not the Insurrection Act, Title X. Title X allows the president to federalize the National Guard and to allow them to act in a support role for federal law enforcement. They can help protect federal agents. They can help protect federal property, but they cannot act like law enforcement officials and, again, perform searches and seizures. They cannot act like ICE agents. But if things continue, you asked me about the Insurrection Act. Obviously, the president has been using certain language today. What happens next? The Insurrection Act is an exception to the Posse Comitatus Act. The Posse Comitatus Act says you can't use the military as direct domestic law enforcement. You can't have that happen, again, unless there are certain exigent or emergency circumstances. The Insurrection Act would present those emergency circumstances. So for me, the real legal question is, are we in a situation where the president can point to that broad grant of authority under the Insurrection Act and say, yes, we can move forward. Yeah. We cannot just have the National Guard, but have them perform those domestic law enforcement agency actions.
This is a president who has pushed the boundaries of constitutional law and law itself. What would happen if he decides these are insurrectionists, invokes the Insurrection Act, deploys U.S. military, and what is who can stop him? He's the president of the United States. If he does that, let's say Marines show up in Los Angeles, who's going to stop them?
So I think at that point you would have California having standing to sue. I'm not saying it's going to be a successful suit. I'm saying they would have standing to sue. The argument would be that the president is infringing on state sovereignty because he doesn't have the power under the Insurrection Act. That when you pull the cord on the Insurrection Act, that you should have cooperation from a governor. Now, there have been, let's discuss, and you may have already discussed, moments in our nation's history where the president has said, I'm sending in troops. That was really about implementing desegregation decisions during the Civil Rights era. We haven't seen the Insurrection Act, in my view, used in modern times against the will of a governor, which is a long answer to your question of what would happen. California would go to court, and California would say the president doesn't have the power. And then we would be in another court battle. We would have a federal judge, likely a number of federal judges making that decision.
It is incredible that we are asking these questions in the United States, that this is even in the realm of possibility of something that can happen. But Professor Jessica Levinson, I would love to sit and talk with you more. Unfortunately, we're facing a time crunch here at the top of the hour. We're awaiting LAPD's press conference. So thank you so much. I would love to talk to you, and I hope we can talk to you about this, and hopefully not about some of the outcomes that we're talking about, our possibilities here. Jessica, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, as we approach the top of the hour, we are going to kind of wrap up this portion of our coverage as we get ready for the LAPD press conference. We'll wait to see if California Governor Gavin Newsom will be taking part. He did post a picture of himself with the chief of police of the LAPD and the LA County Sheriff Robert Luna, that he is in Los Angeles. He is working with those jurisdictions to see what is going to play out and how to best address this situation. But we're going to switch over some crews here as we get ready. So we will continue to cover. You'll still see this Air 7 picture of what is happening in downtown Los Angeles. Things calming down except for that one pocket over the 101 freeway where we see demonstrators continue to hurl objects down at the CHP vehicles below. But stay with us. We are not going anywhere. We will bring you that LAPD press conference here in just about 1 minute as we continue our coverage here on Eyewitness News, streaming and online for Eyewitness News.
It's finally been shown. I was not necessarily screaming when the Invincible trailer is on, because there's a good reason. They have a website. So here's what I can tell you, chat, and it's that I have been with many people that have been working on this for a while, and I think somebody already talked about it in the chat. The folks that are putting this together are a very specific crew that is making this happen for a very long time. I can't get into the gameplay details. We're going to have to wait a little bit for that. But, and there's very few characters that are obviously being shown right now. But yeah, there is an Invincible 3v3 fighting game. It just got announced. It's bloody, it's violent, it has all the thematics of the show. And it is being made by the Killer Instinct devs. It is being the people that put together KI 10, 12 years ago, that was old Double Helix, literally got back together. And these dudes are like, we love fighting games so much. Some of our best memories were like fighting games and stuff. So like, the majority of that crew that made KI 2013 was like, hey, maybe we should do something. So,
this is Eyewitness News with live breaking news.
Now at 8, violent clashes between more than 1,000 protesters and law enforcement officers in downtown Los Angeles. This on the third day of protests over federal immigration enforcement operations. Good evening, I'm Mark Brown. Tonight we have seen protesters shutting down the 101 freeway, setting fire to Waymo cars, throwing rocks, concrete, even electric scooters against law enforcement vehicles on the 101 freeway. We have seen several people pulled out of the crowd and arrested by police. The remnants of less than lethal tear gas and rubber bullets littering the streets of downtown. And beyond what we're seeing on the group, another battle playing out over the Trump administration's decision to deploy National Guard troops to quell these protests that the president is calling an insurrection. We want to begin right now. There's a news conference that is scheduled with the chief of the Los Angeles Police Department, Jim McDonnell, that is scheduled to begin at 8. This is a key element of this because one of the things that the president has been indicating is that local leaders, local officials, we don't know if he includes the chief in that. He has spoken about elected officials and especially the mayor and the governor, saying that they are not responding to the protests in order to quell them, and that is why he is calling in the National Guard. The chief of police of Los Angeles, Jim McDonnell, is going to speak to the news media and to the citizens of Los Angeles. We expect that to happen at any moment. In the meantime, this has been a momentous day here in Southern California, where these protests that began downtown at City Hall and at the Federal Building Complex, including the Hall of Administration and the Justice Department there and the courthouse, those two crowds merged later this afternoon and became a huge throng of more than 1,000 people and began marching around different areas of downtown Los Angeles, City Hall, and elsewhere There has been violence directed at police and at members of ICE. What you're looking at now are live pictures from Air 7 as mounted LA police units are now moving some of those demonstrators out. It has been a pretty amazing day in Southern California, another crazy day of things happening. Let's go to Tim Caputo, who has been out in the middle of it for much of the afternoon. Tim, what are you seeing?
Well, Mark, you really nailed it on the head there. It has been a crazy day, and as the sun starts to go down, the concern, obviously, is things escalate from here. It's kind of interesting as you see the different layers. We kind of took a step back to get a broader vantage point, partially because the area we were on Los Angeles Street earlier was getting a little bit hairy. You could see down the 101 beneath us with all the overpasses and people on essentially every single overpass as police have moved in. Tommy, come to my right here to show these officers who have lined up on the street. We actually saw a number of sheriff's deputies come in on those big trucks with their tactical gear here to assist the LAPD as they try to move this crowd or get some sort of control out here this afternoon. Where we're standing is up on Hill Street. It gives you a vantage point of everything that's going on down below. If you look to my left here on the hill, this has grown throughout the day, and this is something that we've seen not just here a little bit farther away, but even down at Union Station as well. People are showing up. People are still coming out. People heard what's going on. People want to be part of what's going on. And so the crowd is not necessarily getting smaller. It may be dissipating in certain areas, but in a lot of ways it's getting bigger. The folks up here taking some photo, live streaming, being part of it from a distance. As you get a little bit closer, you can start to see and hear where the fireworks are going off. The police department, obviously, both LAPD, the Sheriff's Department, and CHP in a bit of a difficult spot because of the landscape here. You have the overpasses, you have the freeway underneath, and then you have the roads that go around the buildings, both Federal Building and City Hall, over on the south side of the 101. There is a lot of area to cover, and it seems as though from what we've seen both down below and up here, as they start to move a crowd and it seems to dissipate, people just work their way around. They come up the street, they go around the street. So getting control here is almost impossible. So what they're trying to do is get things quieter, but figure out how to finally get this crowd to go home. I can tell you, Mark, from being out here on Friday night, from being in Compton last night, that is a tall order.
Indeed, there are a lot of demonstrators that they still have to deal with. Let's get more from Gabe Santos. He's in Air 7. This is over the freeway bridge under which several CHP vehicles were abandoned after people started throwing scooters and concrete at those vehicles, damaging them, placing the lives of the officers inside them in danger. Let's get more from Gabe about how that situation is now.
Yeah, Mark, this is the situation above the 101 freeway. You have a couple of bridges here. That's the Alameda Street Bridge, and then over to the right is the Los Angeles Street Bridge. And on that bridge, you had a number of protesters throwing things down on the CHP vehicles below. Those CHP vehicles were parked there from, as you see a firework, or parts of a firework going through the shot. Those CHP vehicles were parked there a number of hours ago, about 2 or 3 hours ago, when protesters came onto the freeway and were blocking the southbound lanes of the 101 freeway. CHP moved in, they moved those protesters out, and they controlled that situation, but they left a number of those vehicles there onto the freeway. Eventually, some of those protesters on the overpass on the Los Angeles Street Bridge started chipping pieces of concrete away from the sidewalk and finding other things to throw down, like bird scooters and other electric bicycles. And they started throwing them down onto the CHP vehicles below. Earlier in our live streaming coverage, you saw that CHP vehicle right there was actually set on fire. It looks as if it may not be a total loss in terms of being completely inoperable, but it may no longer be drivable. You see those CHP units there under the overpass there, trying to figure out how to move that vehicle out of the way. The other vehicles, they appear to have been able to have moved those out of the way, and all of those protesters that were on the Los Angeles Street Bridge have now been cleared. LAPD has refocused their efforts, and you now have LA County Sheriff's Department here as well. We've seen Rescue 5, that's that very large Sea Stallion.
Gabe, I need to stop you right now. LA Police Chief Jim McDonnell is about to speak. Let's hear him.
You good? All good? All right, thank you. Thank you. First of all, I know it's a very, very busy time. Thank you all for coming here tonight and allowing us the opportunity to be able to brief the public a little bit about what's going on and what we've been doing, and ask, truly an ask for peace throughout our city. I'm joined here by Gerald Woodyard, Deputy Chief from Operations West Bureau, Herman Hurtado, Commander from Professional Standards Bureau, and from Operations Central Bureau, Raul Jovel, who's also the Incident Commander for Central Bureau and for this incident. So I want to just take an opportunity to speak directly to the people of Los Angeles, clarify LAPD's roles in the events that have been playing out over these past couple of days. This includes our response to protests, our public safety responsibilities, and recent claims that you've seen made by some federal officials. Today I met with Governor Newsom, Mayor Bass, U.S. Attorney General of Central District of California, Bill Aseli, and ICE Acting Director Todd Lyons. Let me begin by reaffirming a core principle. The LAPD supports and protects the First Amendment right to free speech. In recent days, many protests across the city have been peaceful, and we thank the community for expressing their views and their frustration in a responsible manner. However, when peaceful demonstrations devolve into acts of vandalism or violence, especially violence directed at innocent people, law enforcement officers, and others, we must respond firmly. An act of violence, whether toward officers, demonstrators, or the public, will be met with swift and lawful action. Our goal is to maintain order without escalating conflict and to protect everybody's right to safety. Recent public statements have misrepresented LAPD's action from an incident the other night. Specifically, there was a claim that LAPD delayed responding to a federal officer's request for assistance by more than 2 hours. When we heard that, I think anybody who's a police officer couldn't believe it, and certainly anyone with LAPD couldn't imagine how that would happen. Well, it didn't happen, and I just want to go into that just a little bit. LAPD was not given advance notice that the federal operations would occur in that area. As a result, we were not pre-positioned to respond immediately to unrest related to those actions. Once the call for assistance came in, LAPD responded within 38 minutes. And that sounds like a long time, but I'll tell you why that is. The response was impacted by traffic, crowd density in the area with unrest occurring, hazardous conditions caused by tear gas that was previously deployed by federal agents at that location. Many of our officers, because it was put together in a mobile field force configuration without advance notice, were not equipped with gas masks. But despite these challenges, we moved in quickly and as safely as possible. At no point did LAPD ignore or intentionally delay any request for help. I also want to be unequivocally clear. The Los Angeles Police Department does not participate in or coordinate with Immigration and Customs Enforcement on civil immigration enforcement. We've said this over and over again, and I can't stress it enough for the people in our community who have high levels of anxiety about this issue, that we want everybody to believe and be able to call the LAPD in time of need if they've been a victim of a crime or a witness to a crime. We need that. Otherwise, the system does not work. That has been our policy and remains our policy, and it went into effect in 1979. So 46 years ago, that's been the way we do business. On the other hand, however, when a law enforcement agency, any agency, requests emergency assistance to protect lives, we are obligated to respond, and we do. Public safety is our duty, and we will answer every legitimate call for help from anyone. We recognize that immigration enforcement operations can cause a deep fear and anxiety, particularly in immigrant communities. That's why we're committed to transparency, accountability, and treating every Angelino with respect, regardless of their immigration status. Our job is not to divide communities or politicize law enforcement. Our job is simply to keep everyone safe. I want to express my sincere appreciation to all of our officers and partner agencies for their dedication and professionalism during these very challenging times. Their commitment to upholding the law, even in the face of hostility, is a reflection of the values that we stand for. We're working together to keep everyone safe, our officers and the public alike, and this remains our top priority. We'll continue to support peaceful protests and enforce the law when criminal acts occur. The LAPD remains focused on its core mission to protect lives, safeguard constitutional rights, and serve every neighborhood in Los Angeles with integrity. Let me open it up now for any questions you might have or any points that we can clarify. Yeah, if I don't know what basis they used to make that decision, but if that was based on our what I delineated here about the perceived lack of response to a help call by an outside agency, that did not happen. We did respond with mobile field force configuration, and just to explain that, a mobile field force is a configuration of people or officers within the organization that we bring in from around the city. We declare a tactical alert so we can break them away from their primary duties of answering radio calls to be able to come in, form up. They're trained in this tactic into a configuration of 4 squads or a platoon that are led by a mobile field force leader. They then go 4 deep in the car and they drive into the impacted area, and that way they can safely go in a large group of officers and able to handle whatever they come across. If we were to send in a single unit or a couple of units into a riotous scene, certainly they'd be surrounded and the outcome would probably not be good. And so this is a configuration that has worked for us, developed here, worked for us for many years, but it doesn't happen instantaneously. So we have to call in units, we have to meet at a certain location, they get the information they need to operate in the environment, and then they go and they take care of business. And so that takes a little bit of time for us to be able to get in there in about 35 minutes is pretty much textbook. So while we'd love to be able to say we can get there in seconds or minutes, in the reality of a situation of civil unrest, we got to do it right, we got to do it safely for everybody involved.
I probably already said too much. I've played so many versions of it.
Victor, we did a mission trip. We have seen 2 kinds of groups, at least from Friday, Saturday, and today. The community that is enraged and then we're not happy with the elections of ICE, and then the community that moves and attacks in the streets.
Why is anybody surprised? Really quick, man. We got Blackguard with a 20 cents. Just
Yeah,
like you.
to the people who are not happy with the fact that ICE is in the community doing what ICE does, you know, I respect ICE for being a fellow law enforcement agency. They have their mission, they have their what they have to do. We don't engage in that activity, but again, we can't preclude them from doing that. They have every right to do that. I ask people in the community to trust the LAPD, that we're not there for that purpose, and that if they have something they need us to be able to address, we're there for them. As far as the big picture of what can I recommend they do or not do, that's something it's a federal issue, and the federal authorities have the right to be able to do what they're doing. As far as people are worried about the violence that we're seeing, this violence that I've seen is disgusting. It's escalated now since the beginning of this incident. What we saw the first night was bad. What we've seen subsequent to that is getting increasingly worse and more violent. Tonight we had individuals out there shooting commercial-grade fireworks at our officers. That can kill you. And we have adapted our tactics to be able to have a chance to be able to take these people into custody and to be able to hold them accountable. We are overwhelmed as far as the number of people out there engaged in this type of activity. And the type of things that they're doing, they'll take backpacks, and the backpack will have a cinder block in it. They have a hammer, and they'll break up the cinder block and use that, pass it around to throw at officers, to throw at cars, and throw at other people. We've seen people with hammers, and you've broadcasted, breaking the bollards behind the federal building and taking the rocks, if you will, or pieces of concrete, and throwing them at officers. We've had liquid of who knows what description thrown at officers. There's no limit to what they're doing to our officers. And again, as I mentioned in my statement, I can't thank our folks enough and our partner agency police officials for going out there and taking care of the community and trying to be able to put themselves between the threat and the overall community. And they do this night in and night out. And in these past couple of nights, we've seen it at a level that I think disgusts every good person. Thank you, sir. Well, you know, it's an interesting question because I would have said that we could handle this. I believe that we would have gone through a number of steps before we'd have deployed the National Guard or requested deployment of the National Guard. We would normally go to 50% deployment, handle radio calls, and do the business of policing, and everybody else would be focused on the initial problem. Beyond that, then we would request through the sheriff mutual aid, and that would bring in members of the 44 other police departments in LA County as well as the sheriff's office. And so that didn't occur in this case because it wasn't done through the sheriff or through up through the normal chain. It was done from the top down, from the president directing that happen, and then the National Guard was federalized. So they're working for the U.S. Army, not for the California State National Guard. Do we need them? Well, looking at it tonight, you know, this thing has gotten out of control. Before I could answer that, I'd have to know more about what their capabilities are, what their role is intended to be able to make that determination. But we have great cops in Southern California that work together all the time. So we have tremendous capability here. To say that we would go to that right away, I'd say we wouldn't have been there yet. Looking at the violence tonight, I think we got to make a reassessment.
Things that make Windows kind of hard to use. If we rewind to before the Steam Deck came out, sitting down to use
I'd say very little other than we had a conference call this afternoon. There aren't a whole lot of soldiers in place at this time. They're still incoming. But the people who are here, they're tremendous Americans here trying to do, they provide their service, doing the task that they're charged with. Our relationship has been tremendous. Overall with the National Guard. We worked right alongside them for 5 months during the Palisades fire. They were there every day in the beginning in large numbers, and then that narrowed down before they demobilized. But the relationship is overall tremendous. We're very, very good partners with them, and I hope they feel the same about us.
Fast forward to when the ROG Ally came out, the first one, the original one, with the Z1 Extreme chipset. And Asus tried to solve for that problem by making Armory Crate. Lenovo did the same thing by making Legion Space. I would say that Armory Crate, in my opinion, worked a little bit better than Legion Space, and it was okay.
I think the federal agents are enforcing federal immigration law, which is their right, and anybody can have their personal opinion on to what level that should be, who should they focus on, and those kind of things. I won't take a position on that because really that's not our focus, not our job. But when I look at the people who are out there doing the violence, that's not the people that we see during the day who are legitimately out there exercising their First Amendment rights. And to be able to express their feelings about the immigration enforcement issue. These are people who are all hooded up. They've got a hoodie on, they've got face masks on. They're people who do this all the time. Get away with whatever they can. Go out there, from one civil unrest situation to another, using the same or similar tactics frequently, and they are connected. Some would call them anarchists or by any other variety of names, but they're people that we run across routinely, city to city, and this is what they do. So even more disgusting that many of the people who are doing this come in from other places just to hurt people and to cause havoc.
Everything kind of ballooning up screen sizes, and of course go with that huge 8.8-inch screen. But when you look at the screen on the ROG Ally, it's a really, really good screen. The one on the Ally X is the same one, and the panels cameras are also going to be used in these two. So what's different about these two things?
You know, I don't know. That's a very interesting question. What was the catalyst for us seeing the second and third day of this becoming increasingly more violent? To be able to say it's because of the National Guard, it can't, because there aren't enough on the ground at this point to make sense. I've seen civil unrest a number of times before, and generally the second and third days are more violent than the initial days. And so this is not much different from that pattern, but certainly I think there's a number of things that cause people to come out. Much of it is they watch this, they see it on TV, social media, whatever social media outlets they follow, or asking them or telling them to come down and be part of this, and they do that. And they come out here, and many come out and just want to see what's going on. They're out there with their cameras. They're putting themselves in harm's way and potentially setting themselves up for the future. When you look at some of the things that are happening here, somebody could easily be killed. And if you're part of that, then you're going to be facing those charges as well. I talked to the DA just a couple of minutes ago, and the DA will file felony charges on individuals where it's appropriate, but won't be shy about doing that where it is appropriate. And also the potential for federal charges, given the type of environment we're in. And, you know, the federal authorities don't play. And so as we move forward, people will be surprised in some cases for what happens.
Feel like you've been catfished? There's an edible for that. Fruit was just the beginning. It all costs.
Thank you for that question. A great question. It was, how does the deployment of so many officers downtown or in any one part of the city affect our ability to provide police services citywide? It greatly impacts our ability because it pulls officers who are normally deployed in communities around the city of Los Angeles into one area in order to be able to address the threat that we're facing. And so other areas, when we go on tactical alert, that means we only handle radio calls of significant importance, meaning a violent crime in progress, calls that have to be answered right away. So the other calls get put on a queue and may not get handled for some time to come. And they're important to everyone who is a victim of any kind of a crime. And so when we go to tactical alert, we don't do it lightly, but in this case we did it very quickly because we needed additional resources right away to be able to help quell the violence. And that situation, as you can see tonight, has only gotten worse.
80-watt-hour battery, you can play on that thing. Like, I do not ever run that thing out of battery life, and the Z1 Extreme chipset is not a very efficient chipset. So having that massive battery in there, really, really good news. I think I would also assume that...
Yeah, that's something that we did talk about, and there's no resolution to that. And the problem is that we are guided and bound by the California Values Act, which means that we can't participate in any way in civil immigration enforcement. So the federal partners have been reticent to provide information to us before something happens because of that. Part of that is they want to be respectful of the rules that we have to live by, but it also, on a normal situation, not that big a deal, but in a situation like we saw here in the past couple of days, it turns out to be a very big deal. So we're going to continue to work with the partners that I mentioned and many others as we go forward to try and be able to make things as safe for everybody as we
Microsoft
can.
was trying to control our experience with the PC, and it did not work out well for them.
Yes, Captain Raul Javel, Operations Central Bureau, Incident Commander. At least, this is very fluid and preliminary. At least 10 people arrested so far. There's investigation data as we speak. About 3 officers injured. Unfortunately, very fortunate, very minor injuries, or I would say not minor, but they're not significant enough to be transported to a local hospital. But we're looking more arrests as we speak. We're trying to get into that posture where we're able to make arrests. Right now, really, our officers are really under attack. If you can see what the chief is talking about, we're trying to, first of all, ensure that our officers are safe and the public is safe. And then we'll if we can arrest, we'll arrest, and then obviously protect the property.
Called out Steam and Epic
As of now,
Games. You know, they specifically named other stores
And 29
that
last
you
night.
would be able to use. This is
So
no
as we
longer
move
just
forward, we
rumors.
will,
Remember those
step up
screenshots
our
we
arrest
saw
posture,
months ago that showed the Xbox like plans, and you saw a Steam logo go right in the middle of it. It's true.
On this Xbox, you can play games across
I'm sorry,
your
say that
entire
again.
library, including all the Windows PC games.
For me, again, that would be
Steam,
speculative to say how long.
This is exactly what they're doing, and it's exactly what they should be doing.
But by calling out the National Guard, oftentimes their deployment periods are in 30-day periods. And so, to me, it's going to be an extended period of time. I don't know how long that'll be. We're gearing up for that to be able to participate in a meaningful way as we move forward without exhausting our people beyond what they already are. We're a department that went through 5 months plus of the fires and dealing with the fallout from the fires. And as you can imagine, with a very limited sized department to begin with, that's a big stress on our deployment, but more so on our people and their families. So as we move forward, we'll do everything we can to focus on employee wellness and to be able to offer whatever services we can to address the needs of our folks.
Obviously, not every game is going to be supported, but most games from Xbox to Xbox 360 to Xbox One to Xbox Series, they're backwards.
Thank you for the question. I spoke with the sheriff today, and we discussed the possibility of implementing a curfew. We don't rush into doing that, but if we need to do that, I'll go back with the sheriff and we'll look at the options as far as that goes. And as far as, give me the second part of the question. Oh, yeah, I got you. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. When you look at the numbers of arrests we've made, pale in comparison to what will be made. There are video accounts of what happened everywhere on social media, on individuals' cameras, iPhones. We will go after that very aggressively. Go after the all available video, analyze that video, and hold whoever we can accountable for the variety of different types of crimes that have been committed. And that's something we'll do with a number of different partners with levels of expertise that may be beyond what we have. No, thank you for that. Do you have the specifics? Yeah.
So yesterday, the 29 folks were for failure to disperse. They were all arrested today. So today, so far, this is very preliminary because there's so much stuff going on. The stuff that we know is one person was arrested for throwing a Molotov cocktail at an officer, a significant incident, and then another individual for ramming a motorcycle into one of our line where the officers were and injured one of the officers. Everything else is still very fluid.
Put the pressure on the publishers for them. I think it makes Microsoft's job a whole lot.
So CHP has made at least 17 arrests.
Here's what Sarah Buck had to say about it.
We have always wanted you to have the unique experience of Xbox on any screen. That's why we're investing in Xbox Play Anywhere. Whether you're playing on console, PC, Smart TV, or any Windows handheld like
You've just heard from LA Police Chief Jim McDonnell discussing his department's response to the unrest and the protests that are taking place in and around downtown Los Angeles. Of note is that we're getting an indication now of the injuries that have happened. 3 police officers, 3 LAPD officers have been injured, none of them transported, and at least 10 people have been arrested so far this evening and today. One for throwing a Molotov cocktail at police officers, another for ramming a motorcycle into a skirmish line of police officers. But again, the officers that were injured were not transported. Some 29 people arrested last night. CHP has arrested some 17 people. There are arrests being made, and he says there will be more in the future. With regard to the National Guard response, one reporter asking whether we need the National Guard at this stage of the game. He said, the chief said, the first 2 days, it didn't appear that way. I'm paraphrasing. There are normally a number of steps that are gone through before the National Guard is requested. He would have requested mutual aid from different departments, a cooperative effort with the LA County Sheriff's Department. Those things had not yet happened before the National Guard was called in. So he says, we wouldn't have been there yet. That's a direct quote. With regard to whether they're needed tonight, he says he's going to have to reassess and look at how things are going. We're seeing from Air 7 how things are going. You're looking at a parking lot pay booth there that has been set afire by some of the people there. More information coming from the chief shortly, but let's talk to our Gabe Santos in Air 7 about what he is seeing downtown. Gabe?
Yeah, Mark, we're seeing a continued escalation of the situation here as Dayside turns tonight. I'm just getting my bearings here with all the other helicopters up here. We have a number of media helicopters. We have law enforcement helicopters down below at a lower elevation. We have a little bit of a marine layer up above, just to give you an idea of everything we're keeping an eye on up here. We did see this line of mounted officers on horseback push north on Main Street, right next to the famous Olvera Street in the area here, a little bit to the east of Chinatown. There was a barricade set up, and we saw protesters bring a piece of a wrought iron fence and set it down in the middle of the street. Protesters were set up behind that fence. LAPD decided to push forward with rubber bullets and other non-lethal, less than lethal rounds, and continue pushing those protesters out of the way, and they actually just knocked the fence down, and the horses just kind of stepped over it and continued on past. Those protesters continued on towards Cesar Chavez Avenue, and they've kind of split up in all directions, and now we see LAPD kind of holding at this position, but it appears that they kind of moved forward so quickly that now there's protesters behind them, so you have a bit of a safety issue happening there now. Another wrought iron fence, it looks like being ripped out of the ground. We've seen a number of situations like this where individuals are grabbing things and shaking them back and forth and being able to, you know, with a number of individuals, you can do almost anything, and they're kind of doing the unthinkable, things that are bolted to the ground. A number of people are just coming up and pulling fences, and we've seen traffic signs, you know, wiggle back and forth to get them out of the concrete, and that's what we saw earlier over the 101 and Los Angeles Street. That's when a number of items were thrown from the overpass down in CHP cars. That situation has calmed down, but it just goes to show you there's still a number of hot spots here in addition to this one. And I want Rob to go back to that security post there. As LAPD kind of moved forward towards that barricade and pushed past, it appears they didn't really monitor what was going on in this parking lot here. Now you can see somebody has set fire to this paved booth in this parking lot, and with LA City Fire kind of nowhere in sight, they're you know, at their fire stations. They're staying a little bit further away from the scene because of safety issues. You know, just as I say that, not LA City Fire, but LAPD with a fire extinguisher. They're just going to move forward with their fire extinguisher and put this thing out. So apparently they felt it safe enough with their riot gear. You see that officer there with his baton trying to push a protester back there. It appears that they've made the assessment that individuals in this parking lot appear to be pretty calm and pretty docile, in addition to a number of press in the area. It appears that a lot of those people down there that aren't law enforcement are in fact press. So law enforcement made the decision there to just come in with a fire extinguisher and put that little fire out that was in that parking booth. But it just goes to show you that there's still a number of hot spots here that LAPD is keeping an eye on. That's the intersection of Main and Alameda. Once LAPD pushed those protesters down past Olvera Street to Main and Cesar Chavez, you know, just as I'm kind of wrapping my head around what we just saw a few minutes ago, we see another barricade being put up with a number of dumpsters there. So people aren't leaving the area, they're just kind of scattering and regrouping, and then we're continuing to see different little barricades get set up in different spots of town as LAPD kind of continues to push the protesters towards different areas here. We're seeing a little bit of a progression north into Chinatown, but we also have a large group, at least a few minutes ago, that I last had eyes on, that was south of City Hall at, I believe that was Main and I think it was Main and 1st Street, and we might be a little too far away with the buildings in a way here to get eyes on that. What the fuck? But there was a group of about 500 people down on that side. However, that group of protesters they weren't really doing anything that LAPD deems to be a threat. So LAPD is really putting their focus on the protesters on the north side that continue to set up barricades. They really don't want anybody to dig their heels in and set up barricades or anything of that sort, because the longer barricades get put in place, the more they get fortified by other pieces of trash and other pieces of metal that these individuals find, the harder will be for LAPD to deal with it later on. Looks like that's the Spring Street Bridge that CHP now has been able to contain. And I think if we pan to the left, Rob, there, we'll be able to see the Los Angeles Street Bridge, and that's the bridge where a lot of protesters were throwing items down onto the freeway below. And you see that CHP vehicle on a tow truck. That CHP vehicle probably going to be a complete loss. It was actually set on fire earlier as people on the bridge above were lighting pieces of cardboard on fire and throwing them down to the vehicles below. So that CHP vehicle actually caught on fire a little bit before CHP officers were able to move in with a fire extinguisher and put it out. But while we were zoomed in there, you were able to see a lot of debris just spread across the lanes of the southbound 101 freeway. So it's going to be a big cleanup here.
All right, and Gabe Santos, thank you for that. Let's keep that picture up right there, the picture you have. Because the chief in his press conference spoke about the difference between people who are out there expressing their First Amendment rights, expressing their disagreement and disapproval of the ICE raids of day laborers and others, versus the people who are out here doing damage. And he actually had physical descriptions of what some of those people look like, what they do, that some of them are from out of town, some of them are people who go from literally from one position of civil unrest to another. And he described them, a lot of them, as having their faces covered, having hoods and covering their faces. And we did see that among the people who were putting up this barricade. So with regard to how we look at them and we can describe their actions, we don't know whether this is protest or simply anarchy for the sake of it. So we're going to try to draw a distinction, if possible, between those who are out here expressing their disapproval versus the people that are doing things like this, setting fires and barricading streets. So we're going to try to bore down into that particular aspect of what we're seeing. In the meantime, Jory Rand has been covering this for the better part of the afternoon and much of the evening, and has some more reporting for us now. Jory?
Mark, it's a frustrating scene to see play out here tonight. Those protesters, is it a demonstration of protest or is it unrest? And in some cases, as you mentioned, it might just be both. Someone who showed up for one now enjoying the other. It's frustrating to see this continue to play out, and the LAPD just allow this to happen. They are overwhelmed, as the chief heard. As we heard from the chief, that this is still going on, and as Gabe mentioned, once they break up one grouping, it just spreads out to another spot. So we're seeing this play out. We have that parking security booth on fire, and now we have obstructions in the middle of Main Street as this is being allowed to continue. And it would just, a lot of people want to see this end and these people taken into custody. Now, it has been a very eventful day in our city, likely one that we are going to talk about for a long time to come. Now, there are two very different aspects to what is happening this weekend in Los Angeles. Let's begin with what played out on the streets of LA. It was a very destructive day. Several clashes taking place outside the Federal Building. Once that crowd was broken up, demonstrators scattered and a large group made their way onto the 101 freeway. The CHP allowed them to remain there for about an hour. Traffic was stopped in both directions before officers finally moved in and slowly backed that group up and off of the roadway, making several arrests in the process. However, CHP vehicles were left exposed on the 101, and for hours we watched people on that overpass hurl everything from rocks and chunks of cinder block to concrete and electric scooters. They began lighting pieces of cardboard on fire and dropping them on them below. Even a bike was dropped onto a windshield, damaging the CHP vehicles. Now, the freeway takeover leading to some tense clashes between the protesters and officers. You can see one person being dragged away. This was in front of the Federal Building. That person had breached the line, had taken that officer's helmet. You saw him just put it back on there and dragged away. That person was on stilts, and he remained somehow behind. He made his way back behind police lines and was eventually handcuffed and arrested as they worked to take off those stilts from his legs. Multiple methods of non-contact force also used tear gas, blank shot, rubber bullets from LAPD officers. We saw those protesters picking up barricades and benches and chairs from nearby Grand Park to shield themselves, setting up a barricade. This actually happened twice in two separate locations before LAPD officers on horseback moved in and cleared them out. And then there were the fires. Likely the visuals that this weekend's unrest will be remembered by. It's already being used by members of the Trump administration and right-wing media after 5 Waymo cars were set on fire. These are driverless electric vehicles. They have those dangerous lithium-ion batteries that pump toxic fumes into the air. The LAPD sending out an advisory to people to avoid this area, not only because of the demonstrations and what has ensued from them, but the air quality, the chemicals that were being launched into the air there, the danger of being in that situation. So 5 vehicles were burned, literally melting to the ground on Los Angeles Street. And again, it's now a propaganda tool for those who want to go against the leadership of Los Angeles and California. We are seeing those images of those 5 cars on fire today being used, a literal flashpoint in this fight between state and federal authorities.
All right, Jory Rand, your coverage will continue. We thank you for being with us on this and continuing our coverage of this unrest in downtown Los Angeles. We have video from before. This, what you're seeing on the right there, that's a fire that actually broke out while the chief of police was speaking, while Jim McDonnell was speaking to the news media about the department's response, about his agency's attempt to deal with what is unfolding in the city of LA. You could hear sirens behind him as he was speaking. Where he was speaking from, the office of the chief of police, not far at all from where many of these things are happening, just a matter of a couple of blocks away. And so what we're seeing here is, on the right, officers on horseback trying to remove someone, that person who has a backpack, who was not in an area where he should have been. You see them bringing him to the ground. They're going to search that backpack. We don't know if that person ended up being arrested, but we do know that some 10 people have been arrested thus far this evening by the LA Police Department, and some 17 people have been arrested by the Highway Patrol. LA Mayor Karen Bass speaking earlier today about where her disappointment lies with the federal government.
That is really good for the Nintendo Switch 2 and Nintendo. So overall here, I think there's 3 things to consider. Number 1, take all of
situation from happening. I was trying to encourage the administration that if they deployed the National Guard in Los Angeles, it would create a sense of chaos. It's the last thing our city needs. Our city is still trying to recover from the wildfires. And you just think about how so many people were impacted by that. And that's an example of where the administration was helpful. And to go from that situation to where we are now is just really tragic. And I think it's so unfortunate. It's the last thing Los Angeles needs. I have no exact timeline. I cannot tell you that. That's part of the problem, right? We do not know. I have heard a variety of days and weeks. I certainly hope that this is over. The last thing this city needs is civil unrest, and the last thing this city needs is civil unrest that's provoked.
We are watching now pictures from Air 7 over downtown Los Angeles, and this statement from Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth discussing the possibility of deploying U.S. Marines on American soil. That drew a small group of protesters to Camp Pendleton today. More than 4 dozen people held up signs at the main gate there with slogans such as, "We're on a slippery slope to fascism and your oath is to the Constitution." President Trump has already federalized and deployed National Guard members, California National Guard, to L.A. after those protests erupted over Friday's immigration raids. This despite strong objections from both the governor and the mayor. Patrick Saunders is an Air Force veteran. He organized the Camp Pendleton demonstration.
We want to show our support to the military members that work here. We want to kind of remind them of what their duty is to us, but additionally we want to make it very publicly known that we condemn any sort of action by the administration of using active duty or National Guard troops on U.S. citizens.
Meanwhile, U.S. Northern Command confirms 500 Marines from 29 Palms are prepared to deploy status should they be needed to augment and support the DOJ's protection of federal property and personnel efforts. That is a quote. We will keep an eye on that. In the meantime, we are watching people now milling about, moving from place to place in parts of downtown Los Angeles. This is a Chevron station that is near one of the points of conflict. People are going in there. We don't know what they're doing at that gas station, if there's any looting going on. Again, you see people with hoods on. You see some of the people that have been involved in some of the unrest here that are gathered there. We do not know what they're doing. I don't see people coming out with a lot of things in their arms. So that's a good sign, I guess, that it's not being looted, but it's troubling to see people in these circumstances gathering. And that is the area there where a wrought iron fence had been ripped off from an area right around the street and placed in the middle of the street and then fortified with dumpsters. This is another one of these makeshift barriers that people have been using to try to confront the police, and the police are moving in and moving those barriers out. There was a fire a short time ago right in front of that barrier. That has since gone out. Nearby, about half a block to your right, is where some people had set up caused a fire at a pay booth at a public parking lot. This is near Alvera Street, and that police officers actually moved in and put that fire out themselves and moved people out of the way. So the LAPD is responding, but as the chief himself said, at the moment they are overwhelmed. There are more people causing trouble than there are officers to stop them at this point. And whether the National Guard is in fact needed tonight is something that he says will have to be assessed. In the meantime, ABC News reporter Matt Gutman was behind the police lines earlier today. He showed us the projectiles that were coming from both sides of these clashes.
From the LAPD pushing everybody back and using a tremendous amount of non-lethal force. You can see those flashbang canisters, the sponges, 40 millimeter like this, that they fired at people just to continue to push them back. I don't think I've seen this much use of non-lethal in a very long time. We've also seen significant number of rocks, bottles, projectiles that are very dangerous being hurled at the LAPD on this side of the skirmish line. The size of the rocks and projectiles, I'm going to see if I can try to find another one for you, that were thrown were significant. This is a piece of concrete or road that was picked up and chucked. You can see some of the sharper end stones over here, much larger ones than that were hurled at police. So this is something that I haven't seen in quite some time in downtown LA. It was very intense.
So how are they getting those rocks to throw? Well, they're bringing hammers with them, some of them, and they're chipping away at the curb, chipping away at parts of the street or different places on brick buildings and getting those pieces of rock to throw at the police. And a word about those so-called less, or not so-called, they are less than lethal. They're designed to be less than lethal, less likely to be lethal weapons. They're meant not to penetrate the skin. They're meant to disperse the crowd, to cause pain but not permanent injury. But they can, in fact, be lethal. And there have been cases of people who've been hit in the head by these projectiles, because even if they don't penetrate, it's the equivalent of a very hard blow to the body, and that can, in fact, cause permanent damage. People have had eyes put out, people have been blinded, people have had facial bones broken, and suffered internal injuries from those less than lethal weapons. They are not, however, bullets, and are not intended to kill or maim, but they are definitely something that you do not want to be trifling with. As the LAPD is going through this, they are using up quite a bit of those munitions, as Matt Gutman was mentioning. And as we have been mentioning on our air, some of the officers at the scene were starting to run out of those, and they're having to be brought in from other areas of the city because so many of them were being deployed. In fact, you can hear at various times during our discussions and interviews with either police officials or with the mayor, you can hear flashbang grenades and less than lethal rounds being fired, along with fireworks, actually commercial-grade fireworks that are being fired at the police by some of the people in the crowd. And as the police chief mentioned, those can kill. So there are acts of violence taking place here. The police department is responding. The National Guard has been called in. And now we are going to see how this plays out as this continues this evening. Governor Gavin Newsom posting tonight on X. I have formally requested the Trump administration rescind their unlawful deployment of troops in Los Angeles County and return them to my command. We didn't have a problem until Trump got involved. This is a serious breach of state sovereignty, inflaming tensions while pulling resources from where they're actually needed. Rescind the order, return control to California. Those the words of Governor Gavin Newsom. Let's go to Gabe Santos in Air 7 over that area we've been looking at, that Chevron station there. What are you seeing from your vantage point, Gabe?
Yeah, Mark, we've been focused on this this intersection here at Alameda and Main. This is the next kind of barricade that has been set up by individuals that appear to just kind of continue to be setting up a few of these barricades as LAPD continues to push the crowd more and more north. So this is just the latest one, as I see a few people kind of making a run for it there, but we've been focused on this gas station at the top of your screen because that's the reason why there's been a crowd around there is just because that's there was such a big crowd that was pushed further north, and trying to monitor a few different things here to see why people are running. But the crowd had been further to the south on Main Street, south of Cesar Chavez Avenue, that intersection you're seeing right there, and LAPD continued to push that crowd further north. So now you're just seeing the crowd just kind of scatter in a lot of different directions. So a couple people went to the gas station. We didn't see any signs of looting or anything like that in that particular store right there. So that's definitely some good news. But the concern obviously is individuals that continue to make barricades such as this one there on the right side of your screen that's been, as you said, fortified with a couple of dumpsters and a wrought iron fence. We've seen an item set on fire there next to that fence, but it appears that fire may be out as of right now. So LAPD is trying to avoid situations like this, but they're also taking into account all of the resources that they are pouring into the area, and they have been pouring into the area, and they're trying to figure out a way to balance those resources. So they are not at this time making a push further north to knock down that barricade as they had been with previous barricades. They're just kind of holding the scene as it stands right now, maybe to have a little bit of a respite, have a little bit of a calm, regroup, and then figure out the next move. You see the Night Sun from the LAPD helicopter that is over the scene here. We've seen the Super Puma Rescue 5 helicopter. That's the big LA County Sheriff's helicopter here at the scene as well. They've been helping law enforcement keep an eye on things. That parking, that pay-to-park structure at the center of your screen was set on fire earlier, but LAPD actually moved in with a fire extinguisher, and they were able to put that fire out. We were talking about an individual, possibly with a flamethrower, that set fire to a couple of trees there on Main Street, just south of Cesar Chavez. We did see an individual that LAPD believes to be the individual with that flamethrower taken into custody. So that person has been arrested at this time, and LAPD is going to figure out what to charge that person with. Obviously, for having a flamethrower and using it on city streets, that will be very serious charges. And you can see here that's Main Street and Cesar Chavez, and that's where a large contingent of LAPD is staging at this time while they figure out their next move. I want to ask Rob to widen out the shot. Let's look to the south of City Hall, because that's where another group of protesters was located about 30 minutes ago, and we haven't been able to see them for a few minutes now because we've been focused on the group to the north, and there was about 500 people down there to the south. It appears that that crowd may have more or less dispersed at this time and maybe gone their separate ways on Spring and First Street, as you can see right there. So LAPD kind of breathing a sigh of relief as far as the south side of their the area that they're kind of watching right now. But you still have a multi-block area of downtown LA in and around City Hall, I should say, that LAPD is keeping an eye on. You have that scene at the center of your screen, which may become a crime scene, more or less, the lanes of the southbound 101 freeway, where people were throwing pieces of concrete and bicycles and bird scooters and signs from that Los Angeles Street overpass onto the street below. You see all of that debris there. You see a number of those highway patrol cars, and I think, yeah, those are all highway patrol cars down there. You see that they're parked under the overpass, and that's because the ones that weren't parked under the overpass were heavily damaged by items thrown by people on the bridge. And LAPD, the reason why they moved north to begin with was they had to clear that bridge to prevent further damage to those patrol cars down below. You see one of them on a flatbed tow truck. That is the car that was pretty much set on fire earlier, but CHP officers were able to get in there with a fire extinguisher and put out the majority of the fire before it was completely destroyed. But that's going to be a vehicle that's probably going to be a total loss. And you see all that debris there in lanes. That's going to take a while to clean up, and as I said, probably a little bit of a investigation to figure out you know, what charges to file against the people who threw a piece of concrete down there onto the freeway. Those are the southbound lanes of the 101 as you approach the 5 freeway. So still a few prongs of action here that LAPD is keeping an eye on, but it appears, at least for the past 20 or 25 minutes, that we're entering a little bit of a moment of calm while LAPD kind of regroups and figure out what their next move is going to be.
Yeah, Gabe, you know, it occurs to me as we're watching this, there are people driving through the area as if nothing was going on. I think a word of advice would be avoid downtown Los Angeles right now. Just stay out, try to go around it, because you don't know what streets are going to be blocked at any point. You don't know where you might run into a barricade, you might run into a bunch of people who are up to no good. So just stay out of downtown if at all possible. All these vehicles that are trying to traverse the downtown area, I don't know if there are any games or any events happening in or near downtown at the various venues right now, so that might complicate matters as well, just adding to the congestion and traffic in the area. But stay out of downtown if you possibly can. Former Vice President Kamala Harris responding to today's event. She had a statement. She wrote in part, quote, "Los Angeles is my home, and like so many Americans, I am appalled at what we are witnessing on the streets of our city. Deploying that National Guard is a dangerous escalation meant to provoke chaos. In addition to the recent ICE raids in Southern California and across our nation, it is part of the Trump administration's cruel, calculated agenda to spread panic and division. This administration's actions are not about public safety, they're about stoking fear of a community demanding dignity and due process. Protest is a powerful tool, essential in the fight for justice, and as the LAPD, the mayor, and governor have noted, demonstrations in defense of our immigrant neighbors have been overwhelmingly peaceful. I continue to support the millions of Americans who are standing up to protect our most fundamental rights and freedoms." That from the former Vice President and former presidential candidate Kamala Harris. Governor Gavin Newsom and LA Mayor Karen Bass leading the charge. They're blasting the Trump administration's decision to deploy the National Guard after 2 days of protests over federal immigration raids. But the war of words with the White House only escalating tonight. Eyewitness News reporter Jory Rand has been following this political firestorm, this fight. Joins us now live from our newsroom with more on that. Jory.
That fight only growing tonight, Mark. This is a situation our country really has never seen before. It's not unusual for the National Guard to be federalized. We have seen it in the past. Most recently, from what we can ascertain, it happened in the 1960s with John F. Kennedy federalizing the National Guard to allow black students into school, as the governor, namely George Wallace and other officials, were not allowing students into school, breaking federal laws. So the federal government had to come in, take over the troops there. In this situation, it is a little different in that the governor didn't want this to happen, didn't give his permission, and it wasn't because federal law wasn't being executed by the local government. It's because the leader of the federal government wanted to prove a point here and take over and use these state troops under federal power. And so both the governor and the mayor are accusing President Trump of inflaming passions to provoke a response, saying he and his administration are the ones who want violence. Here's a look at some of those National Guard soldiers in Westwood today, guarding the federal building there. We saw it in downtown as well. Governor Newsom today formally requesting that the Trump administration rescind their, what he calls, unlawful deployment of troops in LA County and return control of the National Guard to him. He says, "We didn't have a problem until President Trump got involved." And in fact, we heard from CNN reporting that the Lieutenant Governor, Eleni Kounalakis, is saying tomorrow California will file a lawsuit to try and regain control of the California National Guard. But tonight, the president is doubling down on social media, claiming the protesters are paid insurrectionists, and that word is going to be very important moving forward. Take a listen.
You have violent people, and we're not going to let them get away with it. I think that you're going to see some very strong law and order.
So we spoke with law professor Jessica Levinson today, who says while federal deployment of the National Guard is legal, it typically comes after that state governor makes the request.
The last time that National Guard troops were called up under federal control without the governor's request was 1965. So this is exceedingly rare and legal, but I think what's really important for people to know is unwarranted. There's no indication whatsoever in LA that National Guard troops are necessary to maintain order. The governor has said there's no need. The LAPD has said there's no need. And really,
shooting games, bro.
An unwarranted escalation. The president has the capacity, but he shouldn't use it, and it's been very rarely used previously.
So JFK did it in the early 60s, Lyndon Johnson did it in 1965. Now again, it's the use of the word insurrectionist that will be key here moving forward, because the Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, and the President have suggested that if the violence continues in Los Angeles, Marines from Camp Pendleton will be moved in to take over securing the city of Los Angeles. That would be U.S. troops on U.S. soil against U.S. citizens. That is largely forbidden. The only way that a president is able to do something like that is by invoking the insurrection. That means that the president will have to claim that the country is under attack by an insurrection. Is that happening right now in Los Angeles? It would be a wild legal battle for the president to bring in U.S. troops to face U.S. citizens. And more tonight from Governor Newsom, specifically for residents of Los Angeles. The governor is here tonight. He's urging protesters to speak out, but to remain nonviolent, saying, quote, give them the spectacle they want. Do not give them the spectacle they want by turning violent, referring to the Trump administration, who the governor says wants to see violence play out as he could score political points as things devolve here in Los Angeles. We'll see how this plays out and expect to see some lawsuits filed tomorrow on behalf of the state of California against the president and his administration.
All right, indeed, Jory. And when you talk about troops being brought in to deal with violence such as this, it's a crowd control issue, and troops are trained in other things. They are trained to win wars. They are not necessarily focused, at least in training, in crowd control and using the tactics that police use in urban areas to control and deal with violent crowds. So that will be a significant element that we're going to have to watch for, of course. And we're seeing here another fire that has been set in the downtown LA area. Gabe Santos is over it. What do we have that's burning?
Something else.
Well, it looks like a cylinder of some kind. Appear to have been piled up here at the intersection of Spring and First Street, and the LAPD is nearby, but they're not too close. They're kind of letting this be for now. Their efforts are still focused on the situation on the north side, and I'm looking up north of Cesar Chavez and Main Street, and I see another little fire burning there earlier where we were watching those individuals that set up that blockade, and you can kind of see as we pan over from south of City Hall as we continue heading to the left, Rob, a little further down to the north of where that gas station is. You can see there this new, not a new fire, but it is definitely a fire that has been coaxed accordingly, and it looks like there's a lot of cardboard in that dumpster, and individuals have set that dumpster ablaze. So you now have two bonfires, if you will, illegal bonfires burning in streets here in downtown LA. And LAPD at this point has taken this time to regroup their forces and figure out which one they want to tackle at this time. You have an individual with drums there, you have this dumpster ablaze, you have another little cylinder there on the ground also ablaze, And as these fires continue, LAPD is going to have to decide which one to tackle, because at least at this time, they don't have the resources in place to take one or the other, unless they really coordinate that, really focus on sending a skirmish line to the north and sending another skirmish line to the south. You're going to have these two separate kind of hot spots, these literal hot spots, burning. This one on Main and Alameda, and the other one near the intersection of First and Spring Street. So still tensions rising high as individuals continue to set fires here in the downtown area.
All right, this one a literal dumpster fire. The dumpster fire, of course, has become kind of a metaphor for a failure, a catastrophic failure amongst people who should know better. And so this is what we're seeing play out now in downtown Los Angeles. Of course, the fire that has really caught a lot of people's attention and has gone viral, really, the images were those Waymo cars that were set on fire during the protest. A number of them were kind of parked on the street. Remember, these are driverless vehicles, of course, so there was no person inside to kind of get them out or make a decision as to where they should go. They were sitting there, parked on the street, and as the protests and demonstrations were going on, someone set them on fire, and I believe it was 5 of them that actually burned to the ground. Bruce Thomas, our law enforcement expert, joining us now to talk about what we have seen thus far today and what we're seeing into tonight. And Bruce, I heard an interview with you earlier, and you were saying that what we could expect this evening was kind of what we're seeing here, is that there are going to be smaller groups of people who are really bent on destruction, who are going to go around causing as much mayhem as they can. That seems to be planned there.
Yeah, these are not the protesters we saw during the daytime who are, utilizing their First Amendment rights. Yeah, it did get out of control with the overpass on Spring Street, with the CHP vehicles, with the Waymo vehicles, like you said, over in Earl Street area. But what we're seeing now these are anarchists. These are not law-abiding citizens. These are people that want to cause problems, and they've come into LA to do so.
Wow, and as you're saying that, we're watching somebody who is doing backwards donuts in that intersection, a man driving through.